we really hope you enjoyed this episode. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you could please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can always follow us there. Every like and share and subscribe can help our channel to be seen by many more Stargate fans. So we really appreciate it. And then we also have all of our socials listed up on the screen right now if you wish to follow us there. Okay, thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Bye.
I thought today it would be cool if we discussed Dr. Weir, because I have just now reached the point of Atlantis where there has been a change in characters. So this character arc has relatively come to a at least perceived conclusion. And I thought maybe we could start with kind of talking about the introduction of the character already in SG-1 and how we felt about her in Atlantis. And then maybe talk about some of the ways they, one, integrated her as a civilian into the sort of show that was originally non-civilian, and then also how her trajectory kind of pushed her through into eventually leaving the show, because there was kind of a special plot point that led to her exiting. So maybe let's start with our initial impressions, and I don't know if you're up for sharing yours. Like, what was your initial thoughts when they introduced Dr. Weir in SG-1?
Yeah, so that was played by, I was looking up the actress's name so I didn't get them incorrectly. So that was played by Jessica Steen.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I liked the Weir character. I felt that her portrayal of the Elizabeth Weir that we're used to on Atlantis was a little bit different. It was a little bit more less leadery and more like, although, yeah, so anyways, I'll get into that in a second. But like, yeah, I mean, I guess initially I liked her. I didn't really have like any strong thoughts one way or the other. At the time when I saw her, I think I had forgotten anything about Atlantis because I hadn't gotten to that point yet of watching Stargate Atlantis. And so I think I forgot that her character was like a main character in Atlantis. So I think I didn't really put too much thought into it, to be honest, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, so yeah, I mean, I just kind of liked her character, and I thought, it was kind of different in the sense that uh I can't remember what is that she did. Like she negotiated. She was known for like negotiating
Mm-hmm.
really well and stuff. And so I guess in that sense it was a little strange maybe that she sometimes seemed like she would communicate in a way where she didn't have a voice, I guess. Like she would communicate in a kind of like a held back way, like to the other members of Stargate Command or whatever. And but yeah, I mean I liked her. So
Yeah.
but how about you? Like what were your initial thoughts of that character?
Yeah. I mean, I think initially, on the one hand, of course, you want Hammond back because that's kind of like the
Oh, that's
situation.
right. She had taken,
She
oh,
was,
that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
but I also felt for the character a lot, and I thought the writers did this. It was actually kind of this brilliant situation because you really hate Kinsey, of course.
Hmm.
Like this politicians, the ones you hate, they're the ones doing the wrong things, and it was clear like she wasn't really brought in and felt like she needed to change things. She was kind of brought in and learned everything. Like just you just find out all this stuff, and then suddenly you have to basically serve as kind of the head person in this situation where 24 hours previously you didn't even know this kind of thing existed.
Hmm.
So I felt bad for her. I thought it was really, and it's a little bit of a shame that in Atlantis this couldn't have been explored, obviously, because they're two different shows. I thought there was a really interesting relationship between her and Daniel, because they're both kind of coming from that more diplomatic. They're the one that's always
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to kind of create peace and work through things in a peaceful manner. So I actually really enjoyed the moments between her and Daniel, especially because at this point, Daniel has kind of already been through the ascension process. So he's basically like her, but with the experiences he's had. So it's almost like like a future version of yourself. And
Hmm.
so I thought, to me, that was very interesting because she's coming from the place of probably where Daniel was at the very beginning,
Yeah.
where he hadn't seen all this. And so to me, that I thought was very interesting. Um, I didn't expect she would become a main character. Like it kind of, I thought it was just part of the, the ending arc of the two seasons, that it was brought in to kind of make you feel like everything's falling apart. And that, I mean, who knows, maybe she could have been a recurring character, but I never imagined that she would become a main character.
Yeah. Yeah, I had stupidly forgot that she had that's how she came in, is they had her take over Hammond's spot. And then he never came back after that, right? Or
Yes, no,
did?
he didn't. He didn't.
Okay, yeah. So I think when I was in the midst of watching it, I think I was thinking maybe that he would come back. Like I couldn't I knew he eventually left the show, but I couldn't remember because there was a few times I think even before she comes in that like they can make it like he's about to leave and he doesn't.
Yep.
So I think I was like partially expecting him to come back. Um and so yeah, so yeah, you've refreshed my memory a little because it's a while ago that I saw all of that. And I definitely think I agree with you with her similarities with Daniel and their kind of like dynamic as well. Like with them too, I kind of got like a weird vibe. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got a
Yeah.
vibe there. Um but yeah, I feel like she was just kind of like, tossed into this position. Like it's like in a sense, if I remember correctly, wasn't she like thinking she was getting an interview for something else? And then they
Yes.
have her like in like the limo or whatever, and then they're just telling her everything. And, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's when like was it Senator Kinsey that
Takes her.
also like takes her and like
Yep.
so she's like getting like this overload of crazy like government stuff that she never knew existed, and then all of a sudden tossed into this leadership position. So I can see like now thinking after you reminded me of all of that, maybe why she acted in the way that she did. um it's just I do remember then once it switches to where it gets to the other actress, Tori Higginson that plays Weir, and it's like that first episode, like I felt like that's when you feel
Mm-hmm.
like the Weir character is the Weir character. It's like she feels more powerful. She feels like solid in a sense, like when she's like getting like they're all kind of getting prepared to go to Atlantis and stuff. So like um yeah. So anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. Like she has that sort of leadership air about her. And I don't know, I mean, I would be curious. They must have known at the point that they wrote the end season that they were going to do Atlantis. I'm assuming because it must
Mhm.
have already have been in production and pre-planning.
Well, it
So,
did you ever I don't know if you ever watched this interview with the actress that initially played Weir, Jessica Steen. Um or Stein, I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. But she I think initially was like gonna be that character. Like that was gonna be like I think the plan was always to have her, if I'm remembering her interview correctly, was to she knew that that character was gonna go on to another show, I think, like onto
mhm,
Atlantis. I think the whole reason why she actually was no longer why she basically got let go um was because of issues she had, I think, with like I don't know who made the final decision, but with different producers and stuff, because I guess I find this kind of funny. I shouldn't maybe. Like, I guess she was really into Burning Man
oh, really?
and massively into Burning Man. And I guess like it's this whole thing. And so every year she would have this whole like big like preparation for it and these elaborate costumes and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
everything where then she would prepare to go to Burning Man and it was like a big thing for her. And I guess like initially I don't know if it was her agent or whoever that she spoke with, but like um they thought it wasn't a good idea for her to mention to them that she was she wasn't sure if there would be a schedule conflict, so she was like trying to like sort out her schedule basically. Like she wanted to be Elizabeth Weir, but she
Hmm.
also didn't want it to interfere with like this massive event that she does all the time.
Hmm.
And so like basically I think somehow it ended up that like I don't know if she like lied and I could begin this all ass backwards, but basically I think she didn't tell them the full truth as to why she was going to be away for Burning Man or something like that. And I think she mentioned like it was something else. And then I'm not sure if they questioned her like loyalty of being on the show
Hmm.
because of her kind of giving that importance, and then they basically let her go. But it sounded to be much more of a complicated thing, and I guess like um you know she kind of explained because I don't know much about Burning Man. To me, I just think of a bunch of people drugged out of their minds in a desert.
Yeah.
But like I guess apparently there's more to it than that. Like that's not how everyone like it's a big production of things. Like you can actually create like different, I think they create like different creative types of
Oh,
shows and
cool.
costumes and things. And I think that's what she was part of. Like
Ah,
I don't
okay.
know if she was part of the drug aspect of it. I wasn't really clear on that, but like so it's not fully what people think it is, I think, and associate it with. And so I think like that was part of the reason. Anyway, so I found that really kind of amusing yet sucky for her.
Yeah, no
Like,
kidding.
because she explained it clearly a million times better than I just did, where you could tell that there was a reason that that was so important to her. And it sounded to me like she could have also worked around certain things to still be cast as the character. But anyways, so that's why she was let go. And
That's
then
crazy.
yeah,
Like,
and
that's
then
very interesting. I did not
yeah,
know that.
yeah, and then Tori Higginson didn't initially know that I think she didn't know that she was replacing someone. She didn't
Oh.
know. Like I think like she wanted to when she was first cast, she had no clue that someone else had initially been cast for it and then let go. And so then I think after she had been cast, I believe she says is when she found out, and someone had mentioned to her like, well, did you study Jessica Steen's version of the character to help with your development of the character? And I don't think she did. I think she said like she treated it like any other project she would do, where she kind of studied it in a different way and figured out like how she wanted to portray the character and what made sense to her. So I think maybe that could be why there's that difference of how that
Hmm.
character is portrayed, is because I don't think Tori Higginson took any aspect of what Jessica Steen did with the character,
Hmm.
which I think works out well because I like her portrayal of Elizabeth Weir. And then of course, as I would imagine for any actress, like as you continue being that character, it develops further and becomes natural and becomes a more well-rounded version of that. So I guess
Oh,
that makes sense.
totally.
And I
Well,
know
and
that got a little sidetracked, so sorry.
no, I mean, that's a really, that's an interesting, that's such an interesting detail. And
Mhm.
I mean, that's also interesting that she didn't study it, because I was thinking when you mentioned that and how it's like, then she started with her basically own version of Weir. And it's basically like the same thing as O'Neill portraying the different O'Neill. Like
Mhm.
when they had Richard Dean Anderson, he kind of brought his O'Neill. And I think with Daniel Jackson, they really tried in the beginning. I think they wanted to kind of base him more off of James Spader's version of Daniel Jackson. But I feel like as the show progressed, like Michael Shank's Daniel Jackson came out a lot more.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I think so it's like actually like, I mean, in a way, I also kind of appreciate like that she didn't know and just did her own thing, because it probably would have ended up there anyways.
Yeah.
Um, and unfortunately, she had less time. She didn't have, 10 seasons to be there, or I guess nine, because Daniel Jackson wasn't there in one, but she only had a few seasons. But yeah, I also really appreciate I mean, I like the character because, I mean, now getting into kind of the whole civilian aspect of
Mhm.
it, I really appreciate that they have the new show and they completely went in a different direction, because they picked a woman and they picked someone that wasn't military.
Yeah.
And I think it was very necessary, because they're kind of doing this thing where they're going to a different place and it's very international. That's another thing I actually really liked about the Atlantis is that it suddenly became you have an international group,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and McKay finally gets to come out as Canadian, and then you have like, you know, Zelenka and people from everywhere, and I really like that.
Yeah,
Um, and which I think is much more realistic, anyways, that way. Um,
totally.
you know, but I did really appreciate it, and I also thought, especially in the very beginning of the show, it brought this kind of slightly interesting situation because Weir is technically the head of the Atlantis, but there's also like this military station in Atlantis, and technically Shepard is the leader of that. And so I thought, especially, you know, early on, it kind of created some interesting, I mean, conflict isn't the right word, but it kind of gave, um, you know, how in especially early SG-1, they kind of had some of this banter between O'Neill and Daniel Jackson on this kind of the lower levels of what was going on in the episode. Like, do we
Yeah.
kind of shoot first and ask questions later? Or do we try and negotiate? But obviously, it was more complicated than that. And it gave this really unique dynamic to the show early on. And I thought this sort of situation where, but it's on a much larger scale and with much more stakes, it's a very similar thing because you kind of have, you have Weir, who's in the Daniel Jackson sort of role.
Hmm.
And then Shepard is like running the military, and so you still have that same conflict and situation. And of course, some decisions are easier than others, and sometimes you make the right decision, sometimes you make the wrong. There's always this question of who should I go with, and I always found that interesting.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I don't feel like they let up on it either. Like it kind of continued throughout the seasons, really. I mean, yes, I feel like she became a little bit more comfortable in her role of leading. Um, and like I said from the beginning, she had a little bit more of a leader vibe, but she does show that softer side of how you would be like when you're not like part of military, right? Like and used to
Exactly.
those dynamics and especially whenever military was involved, like I forget the guy that came in. There was multiple episodes with him. The military guy, I don't remember his name, where he was like they were on, was it the Daedalus?
Oh yeah, I know who you mean. And now the name isn't coming to me, but I know exactly who you mean.
But
The
yeah,
commit
he's very
the commit.
military and he always questioned her and was quite rude to her.
Yes, exactly.
Whenever involved her making decisions, and there was times where she had to tell him, that she was the head of Atlantis and it was up to her to make those decisions, not him. And like yeah, I think it makes sense too. Like if you think of this in a real life setting, I think
Hmm.
that's exactly how it would be. I think if a civilian
Absolutely.
was in charge of something, they would constantly be getting like um questioned about their ability to be that role. And then you also have Woolsey that was always like trying to get her fired or and someone else to go into the role. But then Woolsey always had the weird thing of like he would want to get someone out, but then by the end of the episode, suddenly he became nice and figured he'd keep things quiet. So it's
Yeah.
like he's
I
confusing.
I mean, if you think about it, Weir is like in the worst position of anyone because she has the military on her and, like you said, the IOA. So,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's very, I mean, I think it's kind of, I think it's interesting because, yeah, you're right. In the beginning, she is kind of arguing a lot with Shepard, and then I think Shepard really starts to accept her as a leader. They
Yeah.
have a really interesting connection. I really appreciate their relationship. And then later on, I mean, I want to say it's Colonel Caldwell, but I don't think that's right. The
I
commander
don't
of the
know.
Daedalus. Um, but it's something. He's Colonel. Some must be. But they
I think you're
fight.
right. I think you're right. Yep, you're right.
Am I right? Oh my
Caldwell.
gosh.
Yep.
Okay. I was like, I'm digging deep in there
Good
because
job.
it's been a while since I saw that. But they actually, it's almost like then they had more of a clash, and then it became even more interesting because Shepard would a lot of times be more on the, thinking of the way of Weir, because he, of course, has this experience now. He has been on Atlantis. So they almost, I mean, they're all learning together about everything. They're all learning together about the Wraith and what's all out there. And so I think
Yeah.
then it kind of changes how they all think about things, which is interesting to see.
Yeah. And in the
Yeah.
beginning too, Weir and Taylor have that dynamic of like, I felt like you don't see it too much. I don't feel like it's too often as it gets to the later seasons, but in the beginning season, I feel like Taylor's like acting like that like supportive friend
Mm-hmm.
of of Elizabeth Weir, and it was like constantly like reassuring her that she, can do it and make the decisions and all these things, and was very like empathetic towards her situation, which I thought was really sweet that like, here you have the, you know, Taylor that's from, a different planet, being the one that's supporting her and everything. And so I thought that was really nice. Because I think at that point, like a lot of people were questioning if Weir could be a leader and stuff. So like Taylor always seemed to kind of come in and give her a little pep talks and stuff.
Yeah. No, I loved the Taylor and Weir relationship. And
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool because Taylor was brought in as a seasoned leader. Like she had already been leading for a while. It was clear like she was the leader of her people. It was clear that she had already some experience with dealing with these kind of things. Of course, it's a different situation, it's a different people. Um, but it also was very clear that she does have combat skills, but she's also more of a negotiator and empathetic leader type than, say, for example, Ronan, who
Hmm.
is kind of the total opposite of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But but I thought it was really cool because on the one hand, it started the relationship with Weir and Taylor where they had this sort of spy on Atlantis, and so they almost kind of, not like they didn't get along, but it started really rocky because Weir had to take this position of almost not trusting her or suspecting her
Yeah.
because of that situation. And I thought it was really cool that rather than using that and making it that they were kind of rivals or putting some kind of barrier between them, that it actually created a situation in which then they later grew closer together and they had this great friendship and could be supportive of each other. And uh, Taylor could always, yeah, support Weir with her decisions because she had experience doing this and wanted to make her feel positively. So I agree 100% with you. She's like this. I would love having her by my side if I was leading people and didn't know what I was doing. And
Yeah.
I think the more I mean, I understand, okay, with SG-1, of course, they were always running into things that were different and new, and they had to make decisions accordingly. And some decisions were right and some decisions were wrong. Some decisions are kind of neutral. I think in Atlantis, the decision making was even more difficult because they weren't coming from a place where it was their base or their home. It was a place they
Yeah.
barely understood. And they started getting understanding, but it's a very different situation. And I think in a way it almost makes, at least to me, I felt like it made all the cast members feel closer together. And it made me also feel like Weir was maybe closer to the main cast than necessarily the leaders were in SG-1.
Hmm.
I mean, she was clearly a leader. She was clearly in charge of them. But in a sense, in some moments, you almost feel like they start to feel more like close friends or like
Yeah.
peers
Yeah.
because of the situation they're in and the things they face.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that's definitely something that's quite different from SG-1, right? Like where there's like a clear difference in the dynamics between like someone that's like the leader of everything. And so yeah, I think too like as things progress, it's like, she has like I think we've talked about this before, the vibes with current like with Shepard and
Yeah.
like I think they would have made a very cute couple.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like you said, it's like there's that friendship there, but yet then they respect her leadership, but I think more so as it progresses through.
Hmm.
So yeah. Um,
I mean, it's interesting because the problems they have to, as I think about it, I'm thinking, well, the problems they have to deal with are just so different. And I mean, every one of them, every one of the team has had to argue with Weir about something because they felt passionately about something and get the okay. And there were so many times when it's kind of like this question of, oh my gosh, is this really the right decision or not? And
yeah.
I think I feel like at least, and I mean, maybe this is just proximity because I've watched more of it recently. I feel like there were more, in a way, wrong decisions made in Atlantis
Hmm.
on larger scale things that were more like they really could have chosen a different path. But I also feel that they were unavoidable.
Mm.
In many of those cases, I don't know that there would have been a right decision. And whereas I think in Stargate, a lot of the times is kind of they move towards a wrong decision, but then they caught themselves near the end, or they made a wrong
True.
decision,
Yeah.
but I feel like sometimes in Atlantis, when they made a mistake in a decision, it had a much greater impact. I think probably because the enemies are just that much more
Yeah.
complicated, and
Yeah.
dealing with things is more complicated, and yeah, I guess everything, it's so much more, when you really think about it, it's much more complex, like even dealing with the Janai and how they, like, because of course this is a part where Weir had to negotiate and deal with them, and of course in the US I mean in the SG-1 from this US command base, they had to deal with people that were from other planets all the
Hmm.
time that they had no context of, but they were in a place they're familiar with and coming from a command structure they were all familiar with.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really this question, I would also question, yeah, like, okay, if you're in Atlantis and you haven't been there, even if you're higher ranking, are you still high, like, really, are you still higher ranking there? Because if you're higher ranking than Shepard, but Shepard has 3 years of experience with Wraith and you don't, I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of, I don't know, it brings up a lot of interesting questions. But
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
um, out of curiosity, what did you think of the trajectory with Weir, where she is the one that, um, uh, remember when she falls asleep and she's the one that sort of creates a situation where they can either, I can't remember, if it was like exit the city from the floor or resubmerge it, where it basically her actions are what allow them to save the city in the first place.
Oh, because of her being like, are you talking about when she was found old?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, I think, yeah, I'm trying to remember more about that, like the specifics, because I don't know if I fully remember. But it's like it's kind of like I was just actually thinking about this earlier as you were talking. Like I was trying to remember with that specifically, like what fully happened with all of that to then like allow her to be able to then help them with the city. And then part of me kind of wonders with other things that happen later on, like could that have also been something that could have been helped? Like because she had all that knowledge, but maybe not because of how it was, because I don't think like they knew anything about replicators and
No.
stuff at that time. Um, but yeah, I'm not really clear fully on how all of that went down because it was a while ago when I watched it. Um, but what were your thoughts? That will help me like refresh my memory if you want to say your
Yeah.
thoughts on it.
I mean, it also came to me just randomly because I've seen this episode actually a long time ago. So maybe I'll try and look this up, but I think in the general gist of it, I was just thinking that, they had this situation where because of her they're
They have,
okay,
yeah,
and so
yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting. But
And I
yeah, no,
mean,
I would have to refresh my mind too. It just came to me like, but it was a long time ago. This,
Yeah. And I mean, I guess if you think about it too, it kind of makes it even all that much more frustrating when they kind of go against her leadership skills.
right? Yeah,
Because
exactly.
it's like if she freaking like did all of that and saved the city so that there could even be a city to begin with for them to all be on. Because initially, I think what had happened was everyone died, right? Like or like things got flooded and the city didn't work and I can't remember if everyone died or if people just went back. I can't remember what happened. No, they couldn't go back. So it must have been that things got flooded and people died.
Yeah.
Um
I think she also like somehow was able to get them that they could get more ZPMs or something. Because
yeah.
wasn't she with some Z addresses to ZPMs or something like that?
Yeah, I think because of the guy, the one that was like a scientist, I
Because
think, right?
she befriended that scientist and yeah. But yeah, I mean, I just thought that was interesting and then later on, I feel like, I mean, I don't know if you felt this as well. I felt like in season three, almost the entire season, you could feel like they were leading up to ousting her
Yeah.
or that she would quit because it was like already from the get-go, they started to talk about how, oh, you had this poor decision. And I know they always have had this in SG-1 where they've had these like IOA episodes or something or Kinsey episodes where somebody comes in and I could feel it was either coming towards the situation where she would leave the show or that part of the finale was going to be that they replace her and somebody else comes in, kind of like in Stargate when they did that.
Hmm.
But I also felt like that would have been replicating SG-1 too much.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know. Did you also have those feelings?
Yes, and see the thing is a while back because again like we've both said when we're rewatching Atlantis a lot of times we don't remember what's actually going to happen even though we've both seen it before. And
Yes,
there was a lot of Atlantis that I did not remember at all, so it was like watching it for the first time.
same.
It was by accident that I saw on a chat on Facebook where someone was mentioning, oh, well, they got rid of Weir real quick. And I was just like, wait, what? Like,
Oh
what are they
no.
talking about? And so it was a while before that I knew that eventually she would leave. And I was always hoping maybe I misread that. Like I was just like, well, maybe I didn't understand what they were talking about. Like, maybe she doesn't go. And then I think there, well, first off, before I say anything, have you seen like fully what happens with her? Like already you've reached the point of seeing like as in like you've seen the first few episodes of season 4?
I've seen the first three, so I don't
Oh,
know if
okay.
that's the end of it. She's gone. Like she's
Okay.
gone. They have replaced her character, but I
Okay.
don't
Yep.
know if.
Yep. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. I couldn't remember if you just says you just saw the end of season 3, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't say anything that would give anything away. Um, but but yeah, so like I think I had watched something once where the actress was like being interviewed and said something about like, oh, she didn't expect to die and be killed
Oh,
off.
oh, really? Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I know, granted, they kind of leave it open-ended, right? That you don't know if she's dead or alive. I think that's all she meant by that, when she said that. But anyways, so yeah, so sorry, what was your question? Your question, I was getting sidetracked. Your question was, did I feel that they were leading up to it?
Did you feel that they were leading up
Yeah.
to her
Yeah.
leaving?
Yeah. Every episode that they had any kind of inkling of acting like she wanted to leave, I was just like, oh, they're gonna have it that Elizabeth Weir wants to quit and go back back to the her home planet. Or they're gonna have something happen where she has to. And kept feeling like they were leading up to it. And you are right, it was almost like all of the season they were kind of doing that, right? Almost, where they're kind of leading up to that. So I definitely did get that vibe, but because of it going for so long with that vibe, I didn't necessarily fully expect anything to happen then, because then I was just like, well, they're just trying to make us think that.
Right? Yeah, that
Um,
too.
and so then at the end of season 3, let's see what's happening there. It's like replicator stuff, right? And like um they think that they've achieved something, but then with Atlantis, I can't even remember what they did, but like they had done something to help save the city, and then something happens where it doesn't fully work, so then it something like breaks through like right where she's standing, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
beam of whatever the beam was. I think it
Yeah.
was like a beam that was it the replicators that were like shooting it down to the city, or is that something else?
I yes, because but it's like they had the shield, but then so if, I remember what happened. Like just to try and jog my memory, I think what happened is I remember that one guy came in, and this is where I also started to think they were really laying it on thick with the she can't be a commander. That guy came in from the military and started talking about militarizing. He had that plan to sort of take out all those replicator things. Weirdly enough, I totally thought he was a replicator
Ah,
because I was like, there's something off about this. But it ended up that wasn't the case. It was just the plan went totally
mm-hmm.
hinky. Um, but he came and he convinced them to do that. And then, of course, the replicators attack. And um, then, if I remember right, they did this thing where they shielded the city while the replicators were firing at them, but then they flew the city. And yeah, I think what happened is that they had to do something to make some adjustment to the shield for like a microsecond, and then it went through that asteroid, right? And I think what happened is that it was just like a split second that it wasn't there, the shield, and so the beam went
Yeah,
through and she got very injured.
yeah. And so when that happened, did you think, okay, that means she's dead, and then you're not going to see her for season 4? Because I did. I thought, I completely thought that. Like, I thought, okay, that's really sad. Like, they've cut out her character now, they've killed her off, and we'll find out in the first episode of season 4 that she's dead, and they'll have some sort of memorial thing for her. That's what I thought was going to happen. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it
I
kind of
mean,
surprised me how they kind of continued it a little.
yeah, no, same. Because honestly, when it really started to get about her command, and the thing is, I knew that there is a new character in charge already. I had remembered this, so I knew there was somebody else in season 4. So I knew we were left. I didn't know how. Um, I had this question because throughout the whole season, it's like they tried to have the IOA be kind of against her, but then they somewhat changed their mind. And then there was this other military guy, and then you almost have it that she's starting to come to the conclusion of her own that she will quit. But I felt like
Yeah.
because they pushed that so much, that to me, then I thought, oh, it makes much more sense if she does die. And so that's why I thought when that happened, I thought, well, she's just going to pass away in this situation because she'll be too hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I actually thought it was very clever because that's where then it gets to this plot thing. Because one of the episodes in this season was, of course, the one where she was in this sort of dream world and then finds out that she's infected with this replicator, like virus type thing. Um, and McKay discovers that some of that is inactive and still present, and he reactivates it to heal her.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was very controversial, right? Because they figured that she wouldn't want that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of, I believe McKay went against
Shepherd,
like
yeah.
Shepard's direct orders, because then also everything was chaotic because they didn't expect anything to happen to Weir. And so then like they didn't, who's gonna take command if she's, unable to. So then it goes to Shepard, but like then no one was treating him really like he was in a leadership position at first. Like McKay didn't want to listen to him, which ultimately then he ended up not listening to him. But I mean, I think it makes sense in terms of like, it makes sense with human nature. Like you're gonna want to try and save your friend, like, and
Yep.
if you're a genius scientist that can do that, like you're gonna do everything you can to try and like help them. Like you can't just like At least I would, I probably wouldn't listen. I probably wouldn't listen if, if that happened and I was able to think I could potentially help someone. But yeah, so I thought it was interesting how they kind of continued with her character in the beginning of the season, because then I would imagine people watching it for the first time that didn't know, back when it was airing, like then they would think, "Oh, she's not killed off. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
she's in season 4." Like they wouldn't not have her in season 4. Like I mean, they wouldn't show her in season 4 if she's not going to be in season 4, you know? So it's like then you think, "Okay, she's safe."
Yeah, totally, totally. No, what I think in that situation it was really interesting because this is one of those like moments where you really like I don't think McKay could have done anything different because Shepard gave him this, don't do it unless you're absolutely sure. But then I think Shepard was in a situation where he was away or incommunicado with McKay and Weir crashed. And it was literally the only way to prevent her from dying. And so I think McKay had to actually make a decision there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm a little bit, it's like he did go against Shepard, but on the other hand, I'm not 100% sure he really went, like, this is to me a bit ambiguous. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
love it. I love it that it's ambiguous, but it's a bit ambiguous to me whether he went against Shepard's command there or not.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean,
True.
technically he kind of did, but it's also a very weird situation. But I mean, then in the end, that was the thing that allowed them, that kind of that saved them because they had then this advantage that they could infiltrate their replicator homeworld and that they were also able to escape after
Yeah.
because she basically sacrificed herself to save them all.
Yeah.
So,
Which again, she saves Atlantis again.
yes, exactly. Exactly, right? And I mean, it's a completely, and I mean, I do think it's interesting. And I mean, they always bring people back, so who knows? I mean, it's possible, and I kind of I don't know, I vaguely remember maybe like she comes back and then they kind of conclude this, but as far as everybody's concerned, she's dead. They do.
Yeah.
It's very clear because they hire a new person. I mean, I think this is kind of very similar to what happened with Lieutenant Ford, that it was kind of assumed that he was dead, or
Right. They
I
did.
mean, he ran
Yeah.
away or you didn't know what happened to him, but then he came back for a couple episodes and you understood what happened. I mean, now you know he's alive, but they did put the character out in a very ambiguous way.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is, I guess this is also with Daniel, they made it very ambiguous because he ascended. And
Yeah.
then you already
I
at the, yeah,
I think they do that on purpose because then they never know fully where they're going with the story yet.
right?
And
Yeah.
they figure if they leave it where it could be one way or the other, then they can always bring it back if they chose to do so and it seems like the right decision or not for them. So I guess it's kind of genius in a sense of keeping it ambiguous because then it does leave the option there.
Hmm.
Um but yeah, so what did you feel about her replacement being Samantha Carter?
I mean, I love that the replacement is Carter.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, at least this is one thing at least I'm not bummed because I really love Carter being, I mean, now of course SG-1 is over when you're watching this, and so I can also imagine as someone continuing with Atlantis and being sad that SG-1 just ended, and then you turn on Atlantis and then there's Carter and you're like, whoa.
yeah, 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 exactly. Like that's exactly how I felt because I was honestly like quite sad about SG-1 ending.
Hmm.
Like, because,
Same. Yeah.
like 10 seasons, it's a long time to be watching a show, and like, even if you are binge watching it, it's a lot of episodes to go through. So you get, like, I get really attached to everyone.
Right?
And like,
Yes.
so, like, to be able to see, like, her, and then there was, I always forget the scientist that was with her, and, sometimes see a few
Dr.
people.
Lee. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's nice, but I don't you can let me know if you felt the same way at all. I felt strange about it, and not in a bad way, but it felt really unnatural to me to be seeing Samantha Carter in SG-1 and used to how like the dynamic is with everyone on that show to then suddenly have her appearing in Atlantis, which yes, she was on Atlantis a little bit, you know, in
Hmm.
previous episodes, mainly in McKay's like delusion. Um, but like, and I think it brings again with McKay and her, it brings a funny thing because he was so excited to see her there, but then pissed that he wasn't like the leader.
Yeah.
um, but um, like it's honestly like it's weird. I feel like it's taken me a while to get used to her being there, and it's nothing against like that character or the actress or anything. Like there's the part of me that's super excited about it. I'm just like, "Oh, that's awesome." But then there is a part of me that feels like Weir should be there. I feel like Elizabeth Weir should be
Yeah.
there, and it feels very strange to not have her there. And I feel like it, that like I can't remember where I am in season 4. Let me check right now. I'm just gonna quickly check. I use an app to kind of help me keep track of it all. Um, okay, so I'm up to episode 8 in season 4 of Atlantis, and I still feel like I'm still getting used to all the different changes. Like I like Carter being there, but at the same time, for me at least, it doesn't feel like that same like happiness of Carter how she was in SG-1. And it feels very different to get used to because clearly she's playing a slightly different role in the sense that she's in Atlantis and it's different. But I do like that she's there. It's not that I don't. It's just a strange vibe for me to get used to because then everything feels quite different. And I think part of that is also because even though the other doctor as well, I forget her name is, I'm terrible with names,
Keller.
but yeah, is that her name? Yeah,
I think
Dr.
so. Maybe
Keller.
I'm wrong.
Um, they show her a lot more now as well. Whereas
Hmm.
when she first joined, you saw her like a tiny bit.
Hmm.
Um, and they start to show her kind of more and more, which I appreciate because I want to like see more of her character, but then that's also weird too because then Beckett's not there and so it's just like a lot for my brain to get used to.
Yeah. Well, it's I guess it's a situation where there's a lot of casting changes in a short period of time, probably. And
Yeah.
then, but then at the same time, dealing with the fact that SG-1 is over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oddly, I think for some reason, having Atlantis there being consistent actually made the casting changes, I think, in season 9 of SG-1 a little bit more like comfortable. Although I would have to say that I think the first time I watched SG-1 all the way through, I wasn't really overly keen on the casting changes in season 9 and 10. But then when I watched it again, I absolutely loved it.
Okay.
So I don't know
So,
if like,
yeah.
oh, sorry, what?
I was just gonna say it might be a similar thing with Atlantis, like if I were to rewatch it through, because
Mm-hmm.
really it feels more like my first time watching it, even though I've seen it, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember anything of it. So maybe my feelings would be completely different because I know like with SG-1, the casting changes felt very natural to me. I really loved the characters, like nothing about it like yes I would miss the other characters but then I really loved the other characters and so it didn't really affect me like to feel like anything felt off is the only way I know how to put it, whereas with Atlantis it's something about the mix of it being the end of SG-1 then knowing that there's just Atlantis to watch before I get to Stargate universe. But again, like Carter is a known character. Like it isn't like she's unknown and it's this unknown leader. Like
Mm-hmm.
that, I wonder how that would feel. But and I was really excited to see her because I'm like, oh, like because I didn't know that she was the one
Oh,
that they
really?
yeah, I had no clue that I don't remember any of it. So I did had zero memory. Like I didn't think I was going to see Samantha Carter again. So I was really surprised. And so I guess in that sense, maybe I felt the same reaction that someone would had it been the same time when it was airing. Like you'd be surprised, like, oh wow, she's like, taking that role on. And so that was really cool. And I was very excited about it. But then there's just something that has always felt a bit off. And I think maybe what it is that I'm used to seeing Carter have specific dynamics with
Yes.
like Daniel and Jack O'Neill and Teal'c and uh what's his face? Cameron and Cameron, right?
Yeah,
Cameron
Mitchell. Yeah, Cameron
Mitchell.
Mitchell.
Cameron Mitchell. Yeah. No, normally I think I call him by his last name, so that felt weird. I was just like, is that wrong?
Cameron. Especially because she always called him Cam.
Oh,
So,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so I'm very used to her dynamics with everyone from SG-1 and in Stargate Command that I think it's just, I would imagine maybe it takes a little bit of time as well for her character and the actors themselves to maybe get a certain vibe going with the other actors of a new show. I don't
yep.
know, maybe.
No, for sure. Well, and it's also a different, totally different role. It's like
Yeah.
a more of a leadership role, and she has to kind of. I mean, to me, I actually, I mean, it's a bit unfair because I knew that she was going to be the new leader, and but I've only seen, of course, the first one where she's really the leader, where she's arguing already with Ronan and stuff, and I found it kind of interesting, just this kind of new dynamic, and then
Yeah.
seeing her be in charge. And I think actually Amanda Tapping does this really amazing job of being a person that is clearly capable of leadership. But when you first start, and especially with new people, you're still a little bit like
Yeah.
not, you're not trusting yourself entirely or questioning things. And I think she does a really good job of that. So
Yeah.
I actually like I love that because you don't want to have a character that comes in and it would just be ridiculous if they came in and of course they're making all the right decisions and not arguing with anyone and trusting everything. Like nobody would be like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love that you can feel a little bit from the character there, that tension.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I do also like how they had this scene where they had, was it Teal'c that they had like basically like
Mm-hmm.
they showed Teal'c as well to kind of encourage her that she was making the right decision to go to
Yes.
Atlantis. And like I thought that was really sweet because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
expect to see him again either. And so I was
Oh,
just like,
totally.
oh,
Yeah.
I missed them.
Yeah, oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure there are, I mean, I can't remember, but I know there are some cameos of SG-1 characters throughout the final seasons
Oh,
of
cool.
Atlantis. I don't know when
Yeah.
and what. Like, I know for sure Teal comes because there's a scene I very distinctly remember and it hasn't happened yet on
It's so
Atlantis.
weird. I don't know why I literally don't remember anything from Atlantis, like from the first time I watched it. And like, I don't know if part of that was like, I must have been pregnant while I was watching because, I named my daughter Taylor. And like, if I remember correctly, like, we thought of that name because at the time we were watching Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was in the midst of like watching it. Um, so like part of me wonders, I'm like, did I finish? I must have finished Atlantis. I just don't remember it. Like at all. I must have finished Atlantis because then I do remember then watching Universe when that eventually came out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just interesting. I have like
Yeah.
zero memory of any of it.
No, I mean, I only remember those really like obvious things, and for some reason certain things stick out to me, and the Teal'c scene is one thing I remembered. Like the few things I remember the storm. I remembered that Carter was taking over.
Mhm.
There's one more thing I remember I won't say because I don't think you're there yet, and I'm not there yet. And then there's one more thing I remember, but that's it.
Mm. Yeah.
Total of
I
five things,
think
I think.
I think all I remembered from it was like Taylor being a kick-ass character fighting with sticks. And then I remember Ronan and like I just remembered liking McKay like once I was watching Atlantis like and like I remembered like Shepard's face, but like I didn't really remember like anything about any of the show. Like that was about it. Like
I I love how you're mentioning all these things and I remember Shepard's face.
I don't mean that in a creepy way.
Well, this almost like it almost meant like this like it almost meant like in a throwaway way. Like everybody has a distinctive feature, but Shepard, man, I only remember his face. Either that or he's like smoking hot. I don't know.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, sometimes I say things and then I'm just like, if any of the actors actually watched our podcast, they'd be like, nah, I don't want to be on that show. What are they talking about?
Yeah, come on, you meant it in a very normal way. How do you normally remember someone's face?
I don't know. I'm just always a face rememberer. So like, yeah, that's why I'm always terrible with names and remembering names and remembering specific plot lines and remembering all this stuff, but I remember people's faces.
That's really interesting. I'm a face forgetter.
Oh, are you
I
really?
I'm the worst. Like I have met people and they've talked to me and I have left the conversation having zero clue of who they are. And then I find out that it's a situation where I really should have known who that person was.
Oh, how
I've
funny.
I've also seen pictures of people that I really should know that it's them and I was not recognizing them. So
Oh,
I
wow.
it's really I have
See,
some
yeah, I'm
weird.
the opposite. Like I recognize people even if I've just maybe seen them like once, but
Oh,
like
that's
and
amazing.
and I'll always remember their face, but like their names I won't unless I repeat it in my head or like maybe if I have it written down. Like for example, when I used to teach singing a lot and I had a ton of students, like sometimes those students, there'd be certain ones that'd be very sporadic and would maybe be there once a month, you know? And
Mhm.
like I was like constantly teaching. And I remember like there was this little like waiting room where people would wait for their lesson. And I remember seeing someone sit there. I'm thinking, oh, is that my student? Like, I recognize the face, don't know the name, and then like I'm trying to frantically find the schedule on the computer to see like who I had up next, so like I could like say their name because I did not remember their name at all.
Oh man, oh man. Oh, I would hate that. I think that this happened to me one or two times as teaching. And if I had like 30 students and then
Yeah,
so you just
yeah,
kind of have to like, and then and the worst thing is then it comes to you later, like,
yeah. Or if you see that student out and about, like on a bus or something, and you're just like, wait, is that my student? I recognize their face. Like they look very familiar, but I can't for the life of me think of their name. And so
oh
then you just
yeah.
pretend you don't see them because you can't say, hey, you, hi.
Yeah, totally. Well, seeing people out of context is a completely different scenario,
Yeah.
you know? I mean, I guess it's like all those people you've been seeing in other shows that are also in Stargate lately.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's been weird. Yeah, they've just been appearing. Stargate people everywhere. Let's see. Yeah, so I think we've kind of gotten through our list of what we were going to talk about with Weirs or the final thoughts on it. Was there a final part that we haven't talked about yet?
No, but how about like a fun question? Who would you ship Weir with?
Well, you know the answer to this. I would definitely have her be with Shepard.
Yeah, I would say Shepard, but I would say a secondary would be Taylor.
Oh, yeah, that would be cool. They need to have a lesbian couple. Come on now.
Totally. And they would be an amazing one actually. Like they would have made a really good couple.
Oh
But
my
I
gosh,
always
yeah, that would be really sweet.
yeah, I always thought like I could see her with Taylor and I could also see her with Shepard.
Yeah,
But and then it's like I always kind of want to ship Ronan with Taylor, but then I think,
yeah,
well, I don't know, maybe they just be a, yeah, but there's too many. There's too many. But
yeah.
Taylor and Weir kind of always just, I don't know, it would warm the cockles of my heart that I like, just
I also felt like that mean what's his face? Colonel Caldwell.
uh-huh.
Not that I would ship her with him, but I felt like there was a few times like as mean as he was like putting out a vibe. Like
Oh yeah.
I felt like there was something about Weir that he liked that he was kind of like trying to put feelers out to see like if she would reciprocate anything. It was a little strange. Very toxic.
Oh yeah. No, I definitely sensed some moments between them. Like there were definitely some Caldwell and uh, at some points. And I guess when you're like arguing like that, I mean, maybe that brings out that kind of feeling in you. I don't know.
Who
I've never had
knows?
to make those kind of decisions. I've never had to command an intergalactic ship or like a outpost somewhere in another galaxy.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, so I think that concludes, right? That concludes our
Yes, that
discussion
concludes
of Weir
everything.
and her replacement of Samantha Carter then being the head of Atlantis. Yeah, I mean, I guess what should we ask people to say in the comments? Like, I guess what are their thoughts of um did you like that Samantha Carter was chosen to lead? Did you wish that Weir would have stayed on? Like, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah. And how did you feel? Like, I would be interested to hear from people outside of like the IOA or the military what you thought of Weir's decisions and um, her basically leadership skills and how she ran Atlantis. And do you think someone could have done differently? Do you think, what were your thoughts on it? Because I mean, everything's so complicated. I'm sure everybody has opinions, but yeah, tell us, was she a good leader? Did she make the right decisions? What do you
Yep.
think?